Hello, fifth grade, and welcome to day one of our read aloud. So we're going to be sharing a book called Maniac Magee. It's by one of my favorite authors, Jerry Spinelli. So today's focus is going to be on story elements. All stories have to have these elements in order to be a fully realized story. Story elements are things like main characters, setting, which is time and place, problem, solution, theme, which is the lesson or the moral of the story, mood, which is the overall emotion of the story. So you're going to pick up on some of these things as I read aloud today, but probably not all of them. So I want you to write about at least one story element. Now remember, you have to explain your thinking and you have to provide evidence from the text to support your answer. So with that, we'll begin. Again, the title is Maniac Magee by Jerry Spinelli. Before the story. They say Maniac Magee was born in a dump. They say his stomach was a cereal box and his heart's a sofa spring. They say he kept an 8-inch cockroach on a leash and that rats stood guard over him while he slept. They say if you knew he was coming over and you sprinkled salt on the ground and he ran over it, within 2 or 3 blocks, he would be as slow as everybody else. They say. What's true? What's myth? It's hard to know. Finsterwald, he's gone now, yet even today you'll never find a kid sitting on the steps where he once lived. The Little League field, it's still there, and the bandshell. Cobble's Corner still stands at the corner of Hector and Birch, and if you ask the man behind the counter, he'll take the clump of string out of the drawer. He'll let you see it. Grade school girls in 2 Mills, they still jump rope and they chant, "Maniac, maniac, he's so cool. Maniac, maniac, don't go to school. Runs all night, runs all right. Maniac, maniac, kissed a bull." And sometimes the girl holding one end of the rope is from the west side of Hector, and the girl on the other end is from the east side. And if you're looking for Maniac Magee's legacy or monument, that's about as good as any, even if it really wasn't a bull. But that's okay, because the history of a kid is 1 part fact, 2 parts legend, and 3 parts snowball. And if you want to know what it was like back when Maniac Magee roamed these parts, well, just run your hand under a movie seat. But be very, very careful not to let the facts get mixed up with the truth. Part 1. Maniac Magee was not born in a dump. He was born in a house, actually a pretty ordinary house, right across the river from here, over in Bridgeport. And he had regular parents, a mom and a dad, but not for long. One day, his parents left him with a sitter and took the PW high-speed trolley into the city. On the way back home, they were on board when the trolley had its famous crash. When the motorman took the high trestle over the Schuylkill River going 60 miles an hour, and the whole caboodle just took a swan dive right into the water. And just like that, Maniac was an orphan. He was 3 years old. Now, of course, to be accurate, he wasn't really Maniac then. He was Jeffrey Lionel Magee. Now, little Jeffrey was shipped off to his nearest relatives, Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan. They lived in Hollidaysburg in the western part of Pennsylvania. Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, they hated each other. But because they were very, very strict Catholics, they would not get a divorce. And around the time Jeffrey arrived, they stopped talking to each other altogether. Then they stopped sharing. Pretty soon, there were 2 of everything in the house. 2 bathrooms, 2 TVs, 2 refrigerators, 2 toasters. If it were possible, they'd have 2 Jeffreys. As it was, they split them up as best they could. For example, he would eat dinner with Aunt Dot on Monday, Uncle Dan on Tuesday, and so on, for 8 years. Then came the night of the spring musical at Jeffrey's school. He was in the chorus. There was only 1 show, 1 auditorium, so Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, they were forced to share at least that much. Aunt Dot sat on one side, Uncle Dan on the other. Jeffrey probably started screaming from the start of the song, which was called Talk to the Animals, but nobody really knew it because he was drowned out by all the other voices. But then the music ended, and Jeffrey, he just went right on screaming, his face bright red by now, his neck bulging. The music director faced the singers, frozen, with his arms still raised up in the air. In the audience, faces began to change. There was a quick smatter of giggling by some people who figured that the screaming kid was maybe some part of the show, maybe some kind of funny animal. Then the giggling stopped, and eyes started to shift, and heads started to turn, because now everybody could see this wasn't part of the show at all. Little Jeffrey Magee, he wasn't supposed to be up there on the risers, pointing to his aunt and uncle, bellowing out from the midst of the chorus, "Talk, talk, will ya?" No one knew it then, but it was the birth scream of a legend. And that's when the running started. 3 springy steps down from the risers, girls in pastel dresses screaming, the music director lunging, a leap off of the stage, out the side door, into the starry, sweet, onion grass-smelling night. Never again to return to the house of 2 toasters. Never again to return to school. Chapter 2. Everybody knows that Maniac Magee, then Jeffrey, started out in Hollidaysburg and wound up in 2 mills. But the question is, what took him so long? And what did he do along the way? Sure, 200 miles, that's a long way, especially on foot, but the year that it took him to cover it was about 51 weeks longer than he really needed, figuring the way that he could run, even back then. Now, the legend doesn't have an answer. That's why this period is known as the lost years. And another question is, why did he stay here? Why 2 mills? You know, of course, there's the obvious answer that sitting across the Schuylkill is Bridgeport, where he was born. But there are other theories. Some say he just got tired of running. Some say it was the butterscotch crimpets. And some say he only intended to pause here, but he stayed because he was so happy to make a friend. If you listen to everybody who claims to have seen Jeffrey Maniac Magee that first day, there must have been 10,000 people and a parade of fire trucks waiting for him at the town limits, but don't believe that. A couple of people, they truly remember, and here's what they saw. A scraggly little kid jogging toward them, the soles of both sneakers hanging by their hinges, flopping open like dog tongues, each time they came up from the pavement. But it was something that they heard that made him stick in their minds all of these years. As he passed them, he said, "Hi." Just that, hi. And then he was gone. They stopped, they blinked, they turned, they stared after him, and they wondered, do I know that kid? Because people just didn't say that to strangers out of the blue. Chapter 3. As the first person to actually stop and talk with Maniac, that would be Amanda Beale. And it happened by mistake. It was around 8 o'clock in the morning. Amanda was heading for grade school like hundreds of other kids all over town. But what made Amanda different? She was carrying a suitcase. And that's what caught Maniac's eye. He figured she was like him, running away. So he stopped. He said, "Hi." Amanda was suspicious. Who is this white stranger kid? And what was he doing in the East End, where almost all the kids were black? And why was he saying that? But Amanda Beale, she was also friendly. So she stopped and said, "Hi," right back. "Are you running away?" Jeffrey asked her. "Huh?" said Amanda. Jeffrey pointed at the suitcase. Amanda frowned, then thought, then laughed. She laughed so hard, she began to lose her balance. So she set the suitcase down and she sat on it so she could laugh more safely. When at last she could speak, she said, "I'm not running away. I'm going to school." She saw the puzzlement on his face. She got off the suitcase, opened it up right there on the sidewalk, and Jeffrey gasped. Books. Books, all right. Both sides of the suitcase crammed with books, dozens more than anybody could ever need for homework. Jeffrey fell to his knees. He and Amanda in the suitcase were like a rock in a stream. The schoolgoers just flowed to the left and to the right around them. He turned his head this way and that way to read the titles. He lifted the books on top to see the ones beneath. There were fiction books and nonfiction books, who did it books, let's befriend books, what is it books, how to books, how not to books, and just regular kid books. But on the bottom was one single volume from an encyclopedia, the letter A. "My library," Amanda Beale said proudly. Somebody called, "You're going to be late for school, girl." Amanda looked up. The street was almost deserted. She slammed the suitcase shut. She started hauling along. Jeffrey took the suitcase from her. "Oh, I'll carry it for you." Amanda's eyes shot wide. She hesitated, but then she snatched it right back. "Who are you?" she said. "Jeffrey Magee." Where are you from? West End? No. She stared at him. From the flat-soled sneakers, back in those days, town was pretty much divided. The East End, that was for black people. And the West End, that was for white people. I know you're not from the East End. Well, I'm from Bridgeport. Bridgeport? Over there? That Bridgeport? Yep. Well, why aren't you there? Well, it's where I'm from, not where I am. Great. So where do you live? Jeffrey looked around. I don't know. Maybe here. Maybe? Amanda shook her head and chuckled. Maybe? You better go ask your mom and dad if you live here. She sped up. Jeffrey dropped back for a second, then caught up with her. Why are you taking all these books to school? Amanda told him. She told him about her little brother and sister at home who loved to crayon every piece of paper that they could find, whether or not it already had type all over it, and about their dog, Bow Wow, who chewed everything that he could get his teeth on. And that, she said, was why she carried her whole library to and from school every day. First bell was ringing. School was still a block away. Amanda ran. Jeffrey ran. Can I have a book? He said. They're mine, she said. Oh, just to read, to borrow. No. Please, what's your name? Amanda. Please, Amanda, anyone. Your shortest one. I'm late now, and I'm going to stop and open up this thing again. Forget it. He stopped. Amanda! She kept running, but then she stopped, turned, glared. What kind of kid is this anyway? All grungy, ripped shirt. Why don't he go back to Bridgeport or the West End, wherever he belonged? Bother some white girl up there. And why was she still standing here? So what if I loaned you one, huh? How am I going to get it back? Oh, I'll bring it back, honest, if it's the last thing I do. What's your address? 728 Sycamore, but you can't come there. You can't even be here. Second bell rang. Amanda screamed and whirled and ran. Amanda! She stopped, turned. Ugh! She squeaked. She tore a book from the suitcase and hurled it at him. Here! And then she dashed off into school. The book came flapping down like a wounded duck and fell at Jeffrey's feet. It was the story of the Children's Crusade. Jeffrey picked it up, and Amanda Beale was late to school for the only time in her life. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Remember to type your responses in the space below and make sure that you explain your thinking and provide evidence for the text. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.